Unthinkable arrival, a human warship joins the galactic battlefield. HFY, sci-fi story. The galaxy had known peace for centuries. The massive interstellar alliances, composed of species both ancient and powerful, had forged an era where war was a distant memory. Their fleets, vast and technologically advanced, patrolled the cosmos, maintaining order and stability. They were the dominant force, and they thought themselves invincible. Then came the signal. At first, it was nothing but a ripple in the void, a faint energy surge that didn't belong. It originated from a sector of space long thought to be devoid of intelligent life. The Great Alliance, composed of the majestic Arcturians, the cerebral Zorathians, and the formidable Vokhtar, watched the readings in confusion. It had been years since any new species had made their presence known, and they were certain that the primitive civilizations of that region were nothing more than scattered tribes of no consequence. But the signal was persistent. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. A strange distortion of energy. It rippled through their sensors with an eerie precision. And then it came, the source of the signal. The human warship Vanguard emerged from the anomaly, cutting through the dark expanse of space like a jagged shard of metal. Its hull was scarred and marked, evidence of countless battles fought by its creators. At first glance, it seemed primitive, nothing like the sleek, graceful ships of the galactic powers. But that was a mistake, one the Alliance would soon regret. The Vanguard was a relic, a ship built by a species that had long since been thought of as a mere blip in the cosmic timeline. Humans, a species that had risen from a violent, war-torn world, clawing their way out of the ashes of their own conflicts to reach the stars. Their technology was nothing compared to the wonders of the Alliance, but they had something else, something the galaxy had forgotten: resolve, and a willingness to fight against impossible odds. Commander Rachel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, her eyes scanning the holographic display. The bridge hummed with energy, and she felt the familiar weight of command settle upon her shoulders. The voices of her crew echoed in the background, their presence a comfort, a reminder of the thousands of years of human history that had led to this moment. "Captain," Lieutenant Chang's voice crackled through the calms, "we're receiving communications from the Alliance fleet. They're asking us to identify ourselves." "Ignore them," Hayes ordered. Her voice was steady, calm. "They're about to find out who we are." As the Vanguard sailed deeper into the galactic battlefield, the Alliance forces took notice. The Arcturians, with their hyper-advanced ships, moved to intercept. The Zorathians, who had never known defeat, stood ready, their minds calculating every possible move. The Vokhtar, ruthless and relentless, readied their weapons. But none of them had prepared for humanity. The first shots fired by the Vanguard were calculated and precise. The humans didn't waste time on pomp or ceremony. They had been forged in the fires of conflict, and they knew the value of a quick, decisive strike. A volley of missiles tore through the silence of space, striking the Arcturian cruiser with unrelenting force. The sleek vessel was no match for the sheer power of human weaponry. Direct hit, shields failing. The Arcturian captain shouted in disbelief. His species had never encountered such raw firepower. The humans didn't stop there. The Vanguard moved with deadly precision, taking down the Zorathian cruisers one by one. The Vokhtar fleet, once thought to be the fiercest warriors in the galaxy, faltered as the humans' tactics shattered their formations. The battlefield, once dominated by the ancient powers of the galaxy, now swirled with chaos. The Alliance had underestimated the humans, and they were paying the price. "All systems report full combat readiness," Hayes said as she watched the Alliance fleet scatter in disarray. "Target the Vokhtar capital ship. Let's show them what happens when you think you've won." The Vanguard surged forward, its cannons roaring as it unleashed a torrent of energy on the Vokhtar flagship. The ship's shields faltered, and then, with a final, deafening explosion, the massive vessel was torn apart, breaking the back of the Vokhtar forces. The remaining ships of the Alliance paused, stunned. It was impossible. A single human warship had taken down their fleets, and they had no idea how to respond. They had never believed humanity could rise to this level of power. They had thought them too small, too insignificant, but in the blink of an eye, everything had changed. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt the weight of fear. Commander Hayes stood tall, watching as the remnants of the Alliance forces limped away. The humans had not only survived, they had triumphed. "We're not the same species you remember," Hayes said, her voice carrying over the comms to the Alliance fleet. "Humanity has arrived, and we're here to stay. This is our battlefield now." The Vanguard turned, its silhouette cutting across the stars like a harbinger of something new. The galaxy would never be the same again. As the remnants of the galactic powers retreated, a new force emerged, one forged in the crucible of struggle and war. Unyielding in its resolve, the humans had arrived, and they would not be ignored. This was just the beginning. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy would know the true meaning of fear. Unthinkable arrival, a human warship joins the galactic battlefield. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 2. The Vanguard drifted in the aftermath of the battle, its hull scarred but intact, its crew silent, save for the hum of the ship's systems. The vast emptiness of space stretched before them, a reminder of the raw power they had just unleashed. A single human warship had altered the course of galactic history, and as the silence settled in, one question echoed in the minds of the crew: what now? Commander Rachel Hayes stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the starfields beyond. She was a leader, trained for conflict, but even she could not ignore the weight of their victory. They had taken down some of the most powerful fleets the galaxy had ever seen. But that didn't mean their war was over. "Captain," Lieutenant Chang's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've detected multiple ships coming from the Krelian cluster. It's an entire fleet. But they don't appear to be allied with the rest of the galaxy. They're new." Hayes' brow furrowed. "New? How new?" "They're not on any of our records," Chang replied, his fingers flying over the control panel. "These ships are using a different kind of energy signature, completely unrecognized by our sensors." "Great," Hayes muttered under her breath. "More enemies. Just what we need." "Commander, their trajectory is directly towards us," Chang continued, his voice tight with urgency. "They're advancing at high speed." "Weapons ready?" Hayes asked. "Online and primed." "Good," she replied, leaning forward and gripping the arms of her chair. "Let's see what they've got." The alien fleet, a sea of shifting, organic-looking ships, loomed ahead. Unlike the sleek, metallic warships of the Alliance, these vessels were alive, their forms pulsing with strange energy. It was as though they were part of the space they occupied, breathing in rhythm with the stars themselves. "They're communicating," Chung said, "not in any language I recognize." "Open the channel," Hayes ordered, her voice steady but with a trace of irritation. She wasn't about to let another unknown enemy add to their list of problems. If these new ships wanted to throw down, they'd get their chance. A crackling noise filled the bridge, and then a voice deep, resonant, and alien echoed through the speakers. "Human," it said, "you are not welcome here." "That's funny," Hayes replied coolly. "We don't remember inviting you to the party. Who are you?" "We are the Nvaraki," the voice boomed. "We have watched you. Your power is a threat to the galaxy. You are not worthy of existence." Hayes stood up, her voice hardening. "You don't get to decide who's worthy. If you want a fight, you've got one, but understand this, we humans don't back down." For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, the Nvaraki fleet launched an all-out attack, their ships moving in fluid, coordinated waves. "Brace for impact," Hayes shouted. The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it met the incoming barrage head-on. The human warship, though smaller and less advanced than its adversaries, was fierce. The Nvaraki ships fired beams of energy that seemed to tear at space itself, but the Vanguard was nimble, evading most of their shots while retaliating with its own devastating artillery. The first volley hit home, and an Nvaraki cruiser exploded in a burst of light. The alien fleet faltered, but only for a moment. They were relentless, each ship moving like a single organism, responding to the slightest shift in battle. It was clear, they weren't just attacking out of fear. They were determined to wipe out humanity before it could grow any more dangerous. "We can't fight them all at once," Lieutenant Chang called out. "Their ships regenerate too quickly." "We don't need to," Hayes snapped. "Just enough damage to make them realize who they're messing with." She leaned forward, issuing orders with sharp precision. "Target their central vessel, the big one in the middle. Let's give them something to remember us by." The Vanguard pivoted, its engines firing at full capacity. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, every action a dance of deadly efficiency. The Dothraki ships, despite their superior numbers and advanced tactics, couldn't keep up with the unpredictable fury of the humans. Missiles streaked through space, slamming into the heart of the Dothraki flagship. Explosions rippled across the ship's surface, sending debris and energy pulses into the void. The Dothraki commander bellowed, the shock of the attack palpable even through the calms. You dare?" the alien voice said, now tinged with a mixture of fury and awe. "Yeah," Hayes said with a tight grin, "we do. Welcome to the new order." The Vanguard unleashed another barrage of firepower, this time targeting the alien flagship's power core. With a final, ear-splitting explosion, the Dothraki flagship crumpled, its form twisting in on itself before vanishing into a cloud of cosmic dust. Silence fell. Then, slowly, the remaining Dothraki ships broke formation. They hesitated, one by one. Their energy shields flickered, and their weapons powered down. The message had been sent. The Dothraki were not invincible, and humanity? Humanity had only just begun to show its true strength. Hayes stood in the center of the bridge, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The Vanguard was damaged, but it was still operational. The crew was battered, but they were alive. They had won. For the first time, Hayes said quietly, "The galaxy will remember us, and they will never forget who we are." The message had been clear: humanity had arrived, and they were not just a species to be overlooked. They were a force to be reckoned with, and no one, no matter how ancient or powerful, was safe from the human will to survive. And so, the galaxy would change once again. This was only the beginning. Unthinkable arrival, a human warship joins the galactic battlefield. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 3. The Vanguard drifted in the aftermath of the battle, the remains of the Dothraki fleet floating in the void like shattered remnants of an ancient myth. Silence had fallen, but it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was a heavy silence, the kind that came after something momentous, something irreversible. Commander Rachel Hayes stood at the bridge's command console, her eyes scanning the chaotic debris field ahead of them. Her crew, weary but alert, worked efficiently, securing the ship's damaged systems. There was no time for celebrations. They had won, yes, but the galaxy was vast, and the Dothraki were only one piece of the puzzle. "Report," Hayes barked. "Minor damage to the hull, Commander," Lieutenant Chang said, eyes fixed on his screen. "Weapons and shields are operational, though some auxiliary systems are offline. We'll need a few hours for full repairs." "Good," Hayes nodded. "We're not stopping yet. Any word from the rest of the fleet?" Chang's fingers danced across the console, pulling up communications. "No response, Commander. No one seems to be broadcasting on our channels. It's almost like they're waiting for something." "Waiting for us," Hayes said, her voice laced with a grim smile. "That's good. We'll give them what they're waiting for." It wasn't long before their enemies regrouped. The first sign came through a burst of long-range sensor readings. More fleets, this time from the Brather Dominion, known for their monstrous size and brutal tactics, were heading toward the Vanguard. But they weren't alone. The Kortar, a highly intelligent but militaristic insectoid species, followed close behind, their ships looking like giant metallic hives. The message was clear. The galaxy's ancient powers were sending reinforcements. Humanity's defiance would not go unpunished. "Multiple fleets inbound," Chang reported, a note of urgency creeping into his voice. "They've combined forces, and it looks like they're ready to wipe us out in one fell swoop." "Let them come," Hayes said coolly. "We'll show them what happens when they mess with humanity." The Vanguard's crew didn't need further motivation. They had just faced the overwhelming force of the Dothraki and emerged victorious. What were the Brather and Kortar compared to that? Just another challenge. And they were ready. The battle began with a roar. The Brather fleet came in heavy, their massive warships approaching with overwhelming speed. The Kortar ships darted in and out of the chaos, their smaller, agile craft striking fast and retreating before the Vanguard could fully respond. "Lock weapons onto the largest Brather ship," Hayes ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Let's make them regret getting in our way." The Vanguard surged forward, its weapons charging as it met the oncoming storm head-on. Energy blasts from the Brather hit the shields, but they held firm. The human warship fired back with deadly precision, hitting key targets on the Brather flagship with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions rippled through the enemy ship's exterior as the Vanguard's cannons tore through its hull. Lieutenant Chang's voice cut through the noise, sharp with adrenaline. The Kortar are flanking us on the starboard side. They're launching boarding pods. Divert power to shields on the right side. Keep them off our hull, Hayes ordered, then turned to her tactical officer. Countermeasures, activate the EMP burst. Let's disable their pods before they even land. With a sudden, sharp pulse, an electromagnetic burst washed over the battlefield, short-circuiting the Kortar boarding pods mid-flight. The alien vessels, not designed for such a direct assault on their technology, faltered and exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Nice shot, Commander, Lieutenant Chang said, his grin wide as he saw their enemies retreating. But Hayes wasn't done yet. Now, target their engines. We don't want them running. The Vanguard's weapons locked onto the Brather flagship once more, and with a series of coordinated strikes, their engines flared and erupted. The mighty Brather warship, so confident just moments ago, began to break apart, its momentum stalling as it careened into the surrounding fleet. The Kortar, seeing their chance, attempted a last-ditch maneuver to break through, but Hayes had already anticipated their next move. The Vanguard's cannons fired once more, and the enemy ships scattered in a panic. "We've won, Commander," Chung said, his voice full of disbelief. "They're retreating. It's over." Hayes stood still, watching the chaotic retreat unfold. "No," she said quietly, "it's just beginning." Across the galaxy, the word had already begun to spread. The Vanguard's actions had not gone unnoticed, and the once secure galactic powers now found themselves rattled, their confidence shaken. Humanity had proven itself, not just as a species capable of surviving, but one capable of conquering, of challenging the galactic giants that had ruled for eons. And soon, other fleets began to arrive. They weren't sent by the ancient powers, nor were they allies of the Brather or the Kortar. They were new, strange, and completely unexpected ships with dark, oblong hulls, their energy signatures strange, and their intentions unclear. They were neither friendly nor hostile, not yet, but their arrival signaled that the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting once again. And this time, the Vanguard would not be facing just a handful of enemies. No, humanity's actions had lit a beacon across the stars, calling forth others, some eager to ally with the humans, others eager to see them burn. "Get ready for the next wave," Hayes said, turning to her crew. "The universe is watching us now, and they won't be ignoring us for long." As the new fleet's ships glinted on the edges of their sensor range, Hayes smiled. Whatever the future held, humanity was ready for it. The galaxy had made a grave mistake by underestimating them. The Vanguard was just the beginning. And now, the universe was about to learn the true meaning of human will. Unthinkable arrival, a human warship joins the galactic battlefield. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 4. The galaxy had always been a place of grand schemes and intricate politics. Alliances were forged in secrecy, and conflicts were decided by forces far removed from the common soldier. Yet, now, something had changed. Humanity, a species thought to be insignificant, had shattered that carefully crafted balance. The Vanguard, a lone human warship, had already turned the tide of two battles. It had struck fear into the hearts of the galaxy's most powerful empires, and its message was clear: humanity had arrived. The old order would be challenged. But for Commander Rachel Hayes and her crew, the battle was far from over. The strange new fleet that had arrived in the wake of the battle was unlike anything the humans had encountered. Their ships, sleek and dark, hovered at the edges of the Vanguard's sensor range. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they simply watched. "We're not getting any signals from them, Commander," Lieutenant Chang said, his voice tinged with caution. "No communication at all. They're just observing." Hayes furrowed her brow. Silence in the midst of war was never a good sign. "Keep an eye on them. I want to know if they're armed." "Understood." 4 days. The strange fleet remained at a distance, never advancing but never retreating. It was as if they were waiting for something that would decide the next phase of this cosmic drama. Then, without warning, a transmission came through. The voice was low and distorted, alien in both tone and texture. But one thing was unmistakable: it was speaking human. "You have been noticed, Earthborn," the voice said, the words resonating with a deep, unsettling echo. You have disrupted the balance. Your actions have drawn attention, and now, you will face the consequences. Hayes' heart skipped a beat. These weren't just another group of alien invaders. Whoever they were, they had been watching long before the Vanguard fired its first shot. "Who are you?" Hayes demanded, her voice steady but laced with a clear warning. "You've been following us. Show yourselves." The transmission flickered. For a moment, the entire bridge was silent, as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Then, the screen shifted, and a new image appeared. A tall, humanoid figure, shrouded in dark robes and bearing markings that didn't belong to any known species, loomed before them. "I am Kurital," the figure said, its voice still a strange mixture of authority and menace. "Leader of the Orshan, the first to walk the stars. We have watched your species rise from the ashes. Human, you are an anomaly, but you are also dangerous, and that makes you our enemy." "The Orshan," Hayes repeated, her mind racing. She had never heard of them, but there was no time to dwell on that. "You've been watching us? You knew we were coming?" "Not your coming," Kurital replied. "Your awakening. Your species is young, earthborn, but the fires of your war, your tenacity, your refusal to be bound by the will of the galaxy, it is familiar and dangerous." "Is that why you've followed us?" Hayes asked, her grip tightening on the arm of her chair. "To destroy us before we become a threat?" "We will do what we must to protect the balance," Kurital said, his voice calm but filled with an icy determination. "And you, human, will be an obstacle we cannot afford. There will be no place for you in the galaxy." Hayes took a deep breath, her mind working furiously. "You don't get to decide that. We've fought for every inch of our freedom, and we're not about to back down now. If you want war, you'll get it. But understand this, you'll never break us." A long, pregnant pause stretched between them. Kurital's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps respect, or perhaps amusement, in his eyes. "You are more than I expected," he said finally. "It is unsettling. We will see how long that defiance lasts. But be warned, human, we are not alone. The Orshan are ancient. We have been here since before your species learned to walk, and we are not the only ones who take issue with your rise." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in a heavy, expectant silence. "They're ancient," Lieutenant Chang murmured, "and powerful. They just declared war," Hayes replied, "and it's one we're not going to run from." The next few hours were a blur. The Vanguard's crew worked tirelessly, knowing the coming battle would be unlike anything they had ever faced. The Orshan fleet had begun to move, their ships forming an imposing wall at the edge of their sensor range. And though their numbers were smaller than the combined fleets of the Brather and Kortar, there was no doubt in Hayes' mind that this enemy was different. "Are we ready?" Hayes asked, pacing the bridge as the tension built. "Shields at full power, weapons primed," Chang responded. "But Commander, I've been scanning their fleet, and their technology, it's advanced, far beyond anything we've seen. We'll be outmatched in terms of raw firepower." "We have something they don't," Hayes said with a dark smile. "We've got the human spirit, and that's something no technology can replicate." The crew exchanged glances. It was true. The Vanguard may not have had the best weapons or the most advanced shielding, but what they lacked in raw power, they made up for with resourcefulness, adaptability, and sheer will. "Target their flagship," Hayes ordered. "Take out the head, and the body will follow." As the Orshan fleet moved into position, Hayes steeled herself. This wouldn't be a battle of superior technology. This would be a battle of will, a battle to prove that humanity was no longer a race to be underestimated. The Vanguard roared to life as it charged toward the Orshan fleet, weapons blazing. The battle that followed would be brutal, relentless, and unforgiving. The Orshan were ancient, and their ships were built for war, but the Vanguard was human. And humanity didn't know how to lose. The first shots rang out in the silence of space. The Orshan unleashed a barrage of devastating energy beams, each strike sending shockwaves through the Vanguard's shields. But the human warship held steady, its cannons responding in kind, striking with precision and force. The Orshan flagship loomed large ahead, its sleek, black hull glinting like an obsidian behemoth in the darkness of space. Hayes' mind raced as she watched the battle unfold. She wasn't just fighting for the survival of the Vanguard. She was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy, and she knew that they could not, allow themselves to fall. "Prepare for a full assault on their flagship," Hayes commanded, her voice steely. "We're ending this now." The Vanguard surged forward, a bullet in the darkness, as it tore through the chaos of the battlefield and locked its sights on the Orshan's heart. This was it, the moment that would decide not just their fate, but the fate of humanity's future in the stars. And Commander Rachel Hayes knew one thing for sure: humanity would not be forgotten. Unthinkable arrival: a human warship joins the galactic battlefield. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 5. The Vanguard surged forward through the maelstrom of energy blasts, each collision shaking the hull as it pushed through the chaos of the Orshan fleet. Despite the overwhelming power of their adversaries, the human warship moved with relentless determination, like a beast cornered but unwilling to die. "Brace for impact," Lieutenant Chang yelled, his knuckles white as he gripped his station. Another volley of energy beams slammed into the Vanguard's shields, flickering dangerously. Sparks flew across the bridge as power surged and overloaded in places, but the ship held steady. "Shields are holding at 60%, Chang reported. "We've taken damage, but we're still operational." "We're not stopping," Hayes replied firmly, her gaze fixed ahead on the massive Orshan flagship. The dark, imposing ship seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, a silent testament to the age and power of its creators. It was everything humanity wasn't, but that didn't matter. The Vanguard was humanity's answer to the galaxy's complacency. Hayes leaned into her chair, a wave of cold resolve washing over her. "Target their main reactor. We take out their core, and the rest of them will crumble." "We're in range," Chung said, his fingers flying over the control panel. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The Vanguard's weapons screamed to life, unleashing a concentrated volley of firepower directly into the heart of the Orshan flagship. The energy beams struck the massive ship with deadly force, but the Orshan shields flared in retaliation, bending the incoming energy away like water on a rock. The flagship shuddered, but it didn't fall. "They've got a powerful shield," Hayes muttered. "Keep hammering them." Another barrage, another volley, but this time, Hayes saw something: an opening, a subtle fluctuation in the energy field. The Orshan flagship was ancient, and despite its power, it wasn't perfect. "Target the left flank," Hayes commanded. "We need to hit where their shields are weakest." Chang adjusted the targeting parameters, his voice calm but urgent. "Locked on. Fire." The Vanguard fired again, and this time, the blast hit its mark. The Orshan flagship's shield flickered and collapsed, a series of explosions tearing through the left side of the ship. The flagship's hull groaned in protest, and for the first time, it seemed to stagger in space. The Vanguard pushed forward, its cannons charging again. "Captain, we're taking fire from the rest of their fleet," Lieutenant Chang warned. "We'll handle them," Hayes said. "Focus on the flagship. We end this now." The human warship's engines roared as it closed in on the Orshan flagship, but even as they pressed forward, the remaining Orshan ships regrouped, moving in to intercept. The smaller vessels were quicker, their movements erratic and unpredictable, as though they were trying to overwhelm the Vanguard with sheer numbers. "Activating evasive maneuvers," Hayes ordered, her voice steady despite the increasing pressure. The Vanguard weaved through the incoming fire, narrowly avoiding several blasts. "Focus on their fighters. We can't afford distractions." "Firing missile pods," Chang responded, and a volley of missiles shot from the Vanguard, tracking the Orshan fighters with deadly accuracy. Several exploded in space, their remnants dissipating like sparks in the void. But Hayes' attention never wavered. She wasn't just fighting for the Vanguard or its crew anymore. She was fighting for the very survival of her species. And this battle, this moment, would define humanity's future. With a decisive motion, Hayes ordered the Vanguard to engage full speed. The warship plunged directly into the heart of the Orshan flagship's defensive perimeter. The Vanguard's weapons erupted again, this time aiming for the ruptured core of the Orshan flagship. The Orshan flagship's energy shields struggled to regenerate, but they weren't fast enough. The Vanguard fired everything it had. An explosion of light and sound rocked the battlefield as the Orshan flagship's core finally gave way, its energy conduits rupturing and sending a chain reaction throughout the massive vessel. The entire flagship began to fracture, a violent implosion that sent shockwaves across the field. Direct hit, Chang exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. We did it. They're going down. But Hayes didn't celebrate. She couldn't afford to. She watched as the remains of the Ocean flagship crumbled, its once proud form disintegrating into debris. But there was no time for relief. The remaining Ocean fleet, though damaged, wasn't retreating. They were angrier than ever, and the Vanguard was now their target. Get us out of here, Hayes ordered. Take us to the edge of the battlefield. Let's make them chase us. The Vanguard's engines flared to life once more, pushing the ship at full speed away from the remaining Ocean forces. The enemy fleet, still reeling from the destruction of their flagship, hesitated for a brief moment before regrouping and giving chase. This isn't over, Chang muttered. They're going to follow us. We don't need to outrun them, Hayes replied, her gaze steely. We just need to make sure they think we're running. The Vanguard sped through the battlefield, luring the remaining Ocean fleet toward an asteroid field on the outer edges of the system. The Vanguard had no intention of fleeing, but it did have a plan to make their pursuers think they were vulnerable, a plan to turn the Ocean's own pride against them. Set course for the asteroid field, Hayes commanded. We'll use the terrain to our advantage. Prepare for a fight. As the Vanguard entered the asteroid field, the Ocean fleet followed, moving recklessly in pursuit. They weren't used to being challenged, especially by a species they had thought insignificant. But the Vanguard knew their tricks. The terrain would be an equalizer. Deploy decoys and disrupt their sensors, Hayes said. Let's turn their arrogance into their downfall. With a flick of her fingers, the Vanguard unleashed a series of decoy drones, creating false readings that sent the Ocean fleet veering off course. As the asteroid field became more treacherous, the Ocean began to lose their precision. Their ships collided with asteroids and debris. Their momentum slowed. Now, Hayes muttered, her fingers drumming against the console. Let's show them who they're dealing with. The Vanguard turned and launched a final, devastating volley of missiles, targeting the Ocean's lead ships, which had become disoriented in the asteroid field. The missiles struck with perfect precision, each explosion sending a wave of destruction through the Ocean fleet. But it didn't end there. With the remaining Ocean fleet broken and in disarray, the Vanguard gave one final, blinding charge. Its weapons tore through the remaining enemies, a display of raw power and human tenacity. The Ocean were defeated, their forces shattered. Their pride had led them into a trap they couldn't escape. And just like that, humanity had turned the tide. The galaxy would never look at the human race the same way again. As the battle came to a close, Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the wreckage of the Ocean fleet disappear into the void. The Vanguard's hull was battered, its systems compromised, but the ship had endured, the crew had endured, and humanity had proven that they were no longer just a footnote in the grand history of the galaxy. Message from the fleet, Commander, Lieutenant Chang said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and respect. Patch it through, Hayes ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing the faces of her fellow commanders, human and alien alike, who had been watching from afar. Unthinkable arrival, a human warship joins the galactic battlefield. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 6. The Vanguard floated silently in the aftermath of the battle. The stars around them seemed to gleam brighter, as if acknowledging humanity's victory over an ancient, unfathomable enemy. Yet, as the debris from the Ocean fleet drifted into space, Commander Rachel Hayes felt no sense of peace. The victory had been hard-earned, and she knew the fight was far from over. This was just the beginning of something much larger. Commander, Lieutenant Chang called, breaking her thoughts. We've received a transmission from the Galactic Council. Patch it through, Hayes said, her voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of anticipation. The galaxy had just witnessed humanity's first real strike against a galaxy-spanning empire. And now, the Council, those who represented the very powers that ruled the stars, wanted to speak. The screen flickered, and on it appeared a group of alien figures, their faces a mix of species, a towering, insectoid being with multiple eyes, a sleek, lithe figure with dark fur, and a humanoid of crystalline form that shimmered as it moved. All of them radiated power, the same power that had once kept humanity's place in the galaxy limited to the backwater fringes of known space. Commander Hayes, the insectoid leader, Vitkov, spoke, his voice deep and reverberating. "We have observed your victory against the Orshan, and we have seen the destruction of their fleet. It is unprecedented." "I'm glad you were watching," Hayes replied, her tone steady but tinged with a quiet defiance. "But it's not over. The Orshan were only one part of the problem. You've seen what humanity can do. We will not back down." Vitkov's many eyes glinted with an unreadable expression. "Your defiance is admirable, but reckless. The Orshan were only one of many powers who consider your species a threat. Their fleet may have been shattered, but you have awakened the attention of others, and not all of them are as forgiving." A ripple of tension spread through the bridge, and Hayes could feel her crew's unease. The eyes of the galaxy were on them now, and not all of those eyes were filled with curiosity or respect. "You're right," Hayes said, her voice firm. "We're not naive enough to think we've won over the galaxy, but we've earned the right to exist here. If they want war, they'll get it. But I won't let anyone dictate humanity's future." Another alien, the crystalline being, raised its hand, speaking in a melodic voice that seemed to hum with energy. "Humanity's actions have disrupted the status quo. Your presence will not be tolerated unless you comply with the laws of the Galactic Coalition. You must submit to our authority." The arrogance in the crystalline leader's voice was clear. They thought they could bend humanity to their will, but Hayes was undeterred. "You're telling me we have to fall in line?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "We've fought for centuries to be free. You don't get to tell us how to live." There was a long, tense silence. The insectoid leader, Vitkov, shifted slightly, his antennae twitching. "Commander, your resistance is admirable, but it is futile. You cannot face the combined forces of the galaxy's oldest empires. You will be crushed if you do not accept our terms." The words felt like a challenge, but they also sparked something deep inside Hayes. She glanced around the bridge at her crew, her people, their faces determined and resolute. They had already faced down one of the galaxy's most powerful forces and emerged victorious. What was one more challenge? "We've faced worse than you," Hayes said, standing taller, "and we'll face whatever comes next. Humanity is not your to command. We'll decide our future." The crystalline leader's expression hardened, but the insectoid leader spoke again, his tone slightly less combative. "Perhaps you will, but understand this. Commander Hayes, you are not alone in this galaxy. And you have made powerful enemies today. The Orshan were only one of many who will now seek your destruction." "Then let them come," Hayes replied, her voice unwavering. "We've faced extinction before, and we've risen, and we will rise again." For a moment, the alien leaders were silent. Then, the image of the council flickered, and Vitkov spoke once more. "Humanity has made its position clear. You will not bow to us. Very well, Commander, but know this. The galaxy is not kind to those who defy its established order. You will be tested in ways you cannot imagine, and when you fall, as all who oppose the established powers inevitably do, we will be there to watch." The transmission ended abruptly, the screen going dark. The bridge fell into a heavy silence, the weight of the council's warning hanging in the air. Hayes stood motionless for a long moment, her thoughts churning. The battle had been won, but the war, this much was clear, was far from over. "Well, that was a lovely chat," Chong said, his voice dry. "I feel so much better about our future." Hayes gave a small, tight smile. "Don't worry, Lieutenant. This is far from over. We'll show them that humanity is a force they can't ignore." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The Vanguard limped through space, making necessary repairs to its systems and hull. The crew worked tirelessly, knowing that they were now a symbol of resistance, not just to the galaxy's tyrannical empires but to those who saw humanity as little more than an inconvenient blip in the vastness of space. But as the Vanguard neared its next destination, a distress signal interrupted their routine. "Incoming transmission," Chong reported, his voice tense. "It's from the Tracian colonies, human civilians. They're under attack." "By who?" Hayes asked, her mind immediately switching to battle mode. "By an unknown fleet," Chang answered, his fingers flying over the console. "It's hard to get a clear reading, but it looks like they're being overwhelmed." "Set course for the Tracian colonies," Hayes ordered, her gaze hardening. "Prepare for battle. We're not letting anyone wipe out humanity's colonies." The Vanguard surged forward once more, its engines blazing a path toward the unknown threat. Hayes had no idea who would be waiting for them on the other side. But one thing was certain, humanity was no longer the underdog in the galaxy. This time, they were the predators. As they approached the Tracian system, the sight before them was enough to steel every muscle in Hayes' body. The colonies were under siege, their once thriving space stations now burning husks, their once proud fleets scattered and broken. But it wasn't just the scale of the destruction that caught her attention, it was the fleet that had done this. Dark, angular ships, impossibly fast and deadly, surrounded the system, their energy signatures pulsing with a power unlike anything Hayes had ever seen. "Who the hell are they?" Chong asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Doesn't matter," Hayes said, her voice sharp. "We defend our own. All hands, prepare for combat." The Vanguard plunged into the fray, its weapons tearing through the enemy ships with ruthless precision. The unknown fleet retaliated fiercely, but they were no match for humanity's resolve. The Tracian fleet, though beaten, rallied behind the Vanguard, joining the fight. This time, there would be no negotiation. Humanity's resolve had been tested and proven. They would not go quietly into the dark. They would fight, and if the galaxy wanted a war, then they would bring it. As the Vanguard pressed forward, the words of the Galactic Council echoed in Hayes' mind. The galaxy would test humanity, and it would fail. The war was far from over, but humanity was ready to prove that they would never be underestimated again. End of Part 6.